This is the first time I'm doing this. And I hope you don't mind if I have a little understanding of what I'm doing here. We usually go live together with Andrew and we're live with Puša every day. Today's a bit different. Andrew's not here. Him and our son went a little bit of shopping, and I've been up from early morning and making some nice sweets and dinner for lunchtime, so to say. Our oldest son is coming later on. So I just thought I'll go live, winging it, but with Miss Puša today. And I'm in the kitchen, so I'm going to be making this food as I'm going with you. I was kind of thinking a long time to go on or not. And today's Father's Day. And I know it is bittersweet for some people. It's sweet when you have your father with you. It's not so much if you have lost your father. I have lost my father when I was 16. And Father's Day is always a little bit different, right? So hello to everybody who just came in. Hello, Abraxas, Natasha. I'm gonna try and see chat as much as possible. I'm streaming on my phone, which I also have never done before, so bear with me. Hello to everybody, and if I don't see you, please forgive me, as it is my first time doing this. So I'm gonna just talk about my dad and how I feel today, and maybe you can relate to that. I see Natasha said she lost her father when she was 14. If you have had the same experience, please share if you want to. This space is open, drama-free and safe. A little bit emotional maybe today. So what I'm doing today is I'm making an apple cake, and actually that is already in the oven, is almost done. And I'm gonna be making riblets and potatoes with some corn. I don't know how much of that we're gonna be doing on live, because that probably takes half the day, but stick with me. Maybe I'll do some of it while I'm with you. So yeah, so let's talk about our dads, and let's make those of us who, our family, maybe if you don't even have your father, or you don't have kids, by the way, too, you can still celebrate just today, just as another occasion. It's always good to find something, at least a silver lining, right? Thank you very much for all the nice thoughts. As I said, I'll try and see all the chats. It's the first time I'm doing this on the phone, so bear with me. Now, I'm gonna, and if you're vegetarian, I'm gonna be making meat. So a disclaimer, raw meat, just in case if somebody is sensitive to that. So I'm gonna be making some ribs, and guess what? If I disappear from the screen, don't worry, I'm coming back. I usually like very saucy, sticky ribs, but Andrew likes it more dry rub, so to say, and I always get lost in like what to do with that. So I asked yesterday Kirby's Fish and Grill channel. Maybe you're familiar with him. You can go and check his channel, Kirby's Fish and Grill, if he had any ideas, because he has amazing recipes on his YouTube channel. And he suggested me a dry rub that he used to smoke his ribs. The big rack of ribs. So I'm going to try and do that. I'm going to add the description afterwards and the link to the recipe afterwards once I'm offline. I'm going to try and see if I have all the spices here. I hope so. Okay, so let me see. So I'm gonna get salt, chili powder, garlic powder, which I'm probably gonna use the regular garlic, onion powder, lemon pepper. Don't have that. Paprika, black pepper, brown sugar. Also don't have that, so we'll use some maple syrup and tarragon flakes and cayenne pepper or cayenne. How do you pronounce that? Well, I don't know. So, okay, so I'm just going to be doing that and putting some stuff on my meat, and the apple cake is going to be almost out soon. And I'm going to talk about my dad. And please share your experience if you can as well. So, oops. So, my dad, I don't know if lots of you know, I'm actually originally from Latvia, which is northern Eastern Europe, one of 3 Baltic states. It's a separate country. It used to be in the Soviet Union up until 1991. It was occupied by Russia, the same as many other republics and states back then. And yeah, and my parents, most of their life, lived in the Soviet Union time. My dad was born in 1959, and funny fact, he was a year younger than my mother. Yeah, his name was Ivan, or Ivan, you would say, in Russian. And I would say you could probably compare it to John, maybe, in English. I would assume that would be the most common name. And him and my mom met in a very interesting way. My mom was living in a country, and she actually is from the country place. And she was going to the dances at her brother's place where she was staying over. And my father at the time, he was in the Russian army, in the Soviet army, because back then you always had to be in the army, right? You couldn't escape it. When you were 18, it was a must. You had to go for 2 years in an army. Lots of people tried to escape it because the conditions were awful, and lots of times people who were in the army back then were sent to the hot spots, so to say, to Afghanistan, later on to Vietnam, earlier on. So it wasn't fun. Also, the atmosphere inside the army was very tough. They call it Dedovshchina, which basically is like a special name for bullying, extreme bullying inside the corps in army. So yeah, that just by the way. So yeah, he was in the army, and in the summer they were going into the co-op kolkhoz fields and helping pick up, potatoes and carrots and all that stuff. So that summer day, my mom was going to the dances, and my dad was going to the dances after the long day in the field, helped with his army buddies, and they met at the dances. Well, my mom first didn't really think anything too much. She was a country girl. He was the boy from the city, a general's son. My father was my grandfather was a general in the Soviet army, by the way. So, it kind of seemed from 2 different worlds. Plus, she was purely Latvian and he was Russian. And yes, obviously, they both talk both languages, but, there still was some divide in it, I guess, culturally wise. And yeah, just there was a little bit of divide economically, I guess, as well. So mom didn't really think anything too much, after the dances. But my father, I guess, was very impressed with my mother. And she, one of the days, she was helping out something doing at her brother's place. And she seen this man walking up the road, and he found her. He all he knew was her name, but I guess how and why and what made him do that, but he found her. And he started his introduction with one of the poems. My father was a very romantic guy. He knew a lot of poetry from my grandmother, probably, that was teaching him that. Just a second. I have to take out crumbs from the freezer to put on top of my pie. So hang in. That's my crumbs, by the way. So he proceeded to approach her while reading a poem, and I'm too bad, but I don't remember which poem it was. I assume it might have been Pushkin, because that was my grandmother's favorite, one of the favorite poets from classic Russian literature. So yeah, and mom, I guess it impressed her. You know, I don't think back then, and even more or less these days, people get approached with the poetry. It was very, 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 very romantic. So they started going out. Dad was reading poetry to my mom, and she was listening to it. They were talking for a couple of weeks, I guess, while he was doing his army duty there, and she was helping her brother. Now, I'm just putting some crumbs on top of the crumbs. I'm making kind of a layered crumb apple cake here. So yeah, and mom was saying that she fell in love with my father's thick, dark hair. And my father really had thick hair. Like, I think any woman would be so jealous to have it. My son, by the way, Chris, I think he has that set of hair too there. It's quite a, I don't even know the expression now in English. I got lost in words. But yeah, his thick hair. So mom fell in love with thick hair. And of course, his romantic demeanor, you know, it was something really out of this world. Plus, he was in the uniform oftentimes coming to visit her as an army guy. And you know, girls who are out there in the chat now, men in uniforms, there's just something special about it. And he was a nice, tall man. He was 6'2", slender, tall man with dark hair, in the uniform, reading poetry. So that's how my parents met. And yeah, they got married in 1980. So it was still Soviet times. And it was quite I mean, my grandmother wasn't really against it, but I think it took a while for them to get used to the idea that their you know, a general's son is getting married to a girl from the country. A Latvian girl from simple countryside, and my mother was a smart girl, smart woman. Later on as well, of course, but you know the stereotypes: general's son and farmer's daughter. That usually wasn't a best choice of the fit for that time. But they got married. They got married in the countryside, and they had 3 days of the wedding. That's the usual tradition, is 3 days of the wedding and celebrations. And yeah, and I came along 4 years later. So I'm born in 1984. Let me put some timing on here. Let me break up a bit for see you in the chat here. I feel so weird not talking to you guys in the chat. Who do I have here? Christy, DE, Abraxas, of course. Dr. Stanberg is in. Thank you, guys. Arvin, making you guys hungry. WV Muttered, your middle name is Ian. Oh, that's so nice. Dad's name is John. Donnie Shaw, thank you so much. Creators Alliance. Thank you guys. You're so Janet Pickering, Tammy. Thank you so much, guys. Yeah, I just, for those of you who just came in, I just decided to go online for a little bit and talk about my dad. Since today is Father's Day, and I know for lots of people out there, it is a little bittersweet occasion, especially if you have just lost your father, or even if you have lost your father a long time ago. I think it always brings up some emotional memories. So yeah, and I'm making Father's Day dinner or lunch at the same time. So yeah, so we got married in 1980 in the Soviet Latvia, and I was born in 1984. Funny memory that my mom was telling back then when I was born. Men weren't allowed in the labor unit. There was a whole hospital, obviously, that was for just giving birth. And at that time, men weren't allowed to be present or even to be in the hospital. All you were allowed to do is you went into the hall, like a front hallway, and there was this general phone that you called and asked for your wife, or the future mother of your child, and she would either answer through the phone, or if she could, she would go downstairs. But then you could only communicate through this little window if you wanted to pass like any extra food or some things that they needed. So there was kind of like communication was cut till you got the baby out. So when I was born, it was 15th of January, and then it was a snowy. Mom was saying snowy snowstorm. It was a lot of snow. It was the middle of the day, and they had everything, but they forgot, I guess, to bring with them a winter hat. So my mom was trying to tell my dad that she needs a winter hat to bring the baby home for the baby. Now, you can't communicate, and something happened. They couldn't even call through the phone. So my mom was in the top stores of the labor room, labor hospital, and dad was downstairs. And she was trying to show him with signs what she needs, right? Because couldn't really tell because it was up high, you couldn't open the windows, it was winter, and he was downstairs. So she was trying to explain him that she needs this winter hat. So when the day came for me to come home, and dad brought this winter hat, and I still have it. I don't have it to show you, but he bought a hat that could fit probably a full-grown man, and then some. Yes, he bought a hat to a baby, but it was probably sized for a full-grown man at least. Like, it was a huge hat. It was in all Russian colors. It was blue, white, and red. And obviously, my mom couldn't put it on because she probably could have wrapped me in that hat. So yeah, and they brought me home. We lived at the time in the one-room apartment, and it's not even one-bedroom apartment. It's I would say to North American standards, it's a bachelorette pad style apartment, but lots of people had it that way because you weren't able to buy apartment, and you had to apply for apartment and wait in a line for years sometimes to be given the apartment. And by the time you actually finally got the apartment, if you applied for a one-room apartment, but if years later, you had 3 kids since then, well, you still got that one-room apartment because that's what you applied for, right? Nobody really cared that your family has expanded. So sometimes there were like 5 people in a bachelorette pad, or in the co-op apartment cell, so to say, where it's like 1 bathroom and 5 apartments. Because that's what you applied for, right? So we lived in that, but I didn't complain about that really because I didn't really know any different too much. Everybody was living that way around, and I had a room that was basically a part of that bachelor pad that was divided with furniture. So on one side of the furniture was my parents' bedroom and living room, the same space. And then on the other side of the furniture was my room. It was basically a little rectangle, you know, you could fit a desk, a bed, maybe a drawer or something like that. So it wasn't too much of a space, but there we lived for some time. And I mean, my mom lived there up until she passed away 5 years ago. So I would call it my home. Yeah, and my dad used to be a lot of things. Like he was a truck driver. So maybe that's one of the things why I fell in love with Andrew as well. He used to be a truck driver too. And my dad used to drive Kamas and all the old Soviet trucks to and across Soviet states and go for days. I don't know if Ervin, the paid tourist, is still in the chat. My hands are quite dirty, so I can't really check that. But if he's there, he's a trucker too, so he knows what I'm talking about. He was away for long periods of time sometimes, and I think one of my fondest memories, one of them, is him letting me drive this truck. Of course, I was little, so I couldn't reach the pedals, obviously, but he used to let me sit on his lap and steer a big Kamaz truck with a trailer behind it. And I was so excited. Oh my God. I mean, the child was on top of the world. He knew how to win me over. Yeah, that's one of the memories. And yeah, and my father, he finished engineering in university. And for those of you who have followed us on our live streams in the evenings, we have mentioned a couple of times and showed pictures. My father was a pilot as well. So it was my grandfather and his father as well. It was a dynasty of pilots. And at the time when my dad was in the army and a pilot, Chernobyl happened. And my dad was one of the first ones who were sent as a rescue team to Chernobyl area to evacuate people. And he haven't talked about that too much. I more know about it as a fact. I know about stuff that my mom have told about it. I guess I wasn't too interested in it at the time before he passed away to ask all the details. I do know that he haven't talked too much about it because obviously, I mean, you know, the nuclear reactor explosion, so to say, for those of you who don't know, Chernobyl, that was quite something at that time. It was, I think, 1989. Don't quote me on that. I'm so bad at the years. So yeah, and he was there. And funny or not funny fact, for them to not get radiation from the plant, because I mean the levels of radiation was like up through the roof. They actually were telling them and giving them alcohol shots to the pilots, and telling them that it's going to prevent them from absorbing radiation. And I don't know really if they believed into that, but I guess the stuff that they had to see and the way they had to evacuate the people at the very close aftermath of the explosion happening just made it maybe a little bit easier. You would have never thought of that happening nowadays or in North America, I guess, but in Soviet times there was lots of things that were done differently. So yeah, that was one of the things my dad did. I think it's quite heroic, I must say. And again, I didn't really realize what he was doing before he passed away. So I didn't have a chance to talk with him about it too much, unfortunately. Yeah, and then 1991 happened. We thankfully, our country gained independence back, but with that happened a lot of financial strains as well. You know, the monetary value dropped a couple of times. People lost their jobs, quite similar to how it happened here in 2008. We had that all upside down world when wall fell and we gained our independence. I think that personally that shook my dad as well. It was hard to find jobs. He was going into real estate. He was selling some houses. He was also working as a bodyguard for various government officials, and then afterwards also businessmen in Latvia and in Russia, in Moscow. And yeah, with his formal training in army and his stature of 6'2", they were hiring him as a bodyguard. Obviously, had some certification of that as well, I'm sure. He also used to be a taxi driver and used to tell me stories about him driving through the city at night and all the people that would jump in and tell their stories from their night out, things like that. But I think the things that I value the most with my father is a philosophical talks with him. When I think about my father, I always think of us sitting on the stairs on the outside stairs of our summer house and looking at the stars. We used to love to look together in the sky and watch the stars, and he would show me different star constellations. He knew the names of them and where was which, and I guess that was my grandfather's. Thanks to him, he knew that because my grandfather was a lot into astronomy, so to say. So we used to sit in the summers and watch stars, count stars falling down, and talk about life. And I think no matter how hard it was through Soviet times, through going through the Soviet army, through divorce with my mom, by the way, that I didn't mention. They did divorce in 1992, I think. Well, not so long after Soviet Union fell. But I still got like with my father so well together. My mother never said a bad word about my father, ever to me. No matter what they had, the issues, why they separated, why they divorced, I never heard anything bad about him. I never was forbidden to see him. So I'm thankful to my mother that she never prevented me from contacting him or being in touch with him on a regular basis. So yeah, when we did meet, we did a lot of that. We would go and feed swans. We had lakes full of swans. And we would go and feed breadcrumbs to them when I was little. In the winter, we would go down in a sleigh up the little hill outside the house. And in the summer, we would sit on the stairs and look and count the stars and talk about life and the future. And back then, I wanted to be a doctor. Well, to be honest, to tell you, I wanted to be the doctor up until after high school when I did try to get into university for medical science degree. But my dad always said that, you know what, why do you want to be a doctor? He said. I said I wanted to help people. So he said, you know what, you don't have to be a doctor to help people. You can help people even if you're not a doctor. You just got to find a way. And I think since I never became a doctor, as you can see, I always try to find a different way of helping them. I always hear his voice in my head about it. There are two sentences that my dad always said, and I always remember them in the tough times. And I will say them in Russian, and I'll try to translate them. One would be,
Живы будем, не помрем. And the other one is Морская гвардия не тонет. Which basically, the first one translates, you are not dead as long as you're alive. And the second one is that the Navy never goes down. And it might not make sense to you at all when I said that, but to me, it always was sentences of strength and inspiration, motivation of pulling through the bad things when they were happening. And remembering the tough times that my father, my grandparents, my mother had to go through in Soviet times. And that kind of always motivates to stop complaining about the life that we have here, right? So yeah, today's Father's Day, and my rambling about my father might make no sense. I really wasn't planning to do this. I was making supper or lunch time, brunch. I don't know how to call it, for Andrew and for our family. Our oldest one is coming over today for lunchtime. And as Andrew is out with our son now, I just was thinking about my father, who passed away when I was 16. And hugs to all of you guys who have lost their fathers in the recent days, or even if it was long ago. I know it still eats at your heart and soul, even if it happened 25 years ago or 30 years ago. I think it's, in a way, in the days like these, on their birthdays, on their death anniversaries, it always seems like they have just passed away. The feeling is all the same there, but we all have the memories, and try to cling them and share them with my kids and with you now, and hopefully this video stays on for my kids to watch when they grow up as well. Yeah, my father passed away when I was 16. He was killed on the street, well, murdered on the street nearby the forest path that he used to take walking from my mother's house to his mother's house at the time he was living at my grandma's. And he used to walk, I think it's like 4 miles or something like that in between of the areas that they lived. And he was going from one place to another, and somebody attacked him. We don't know who, and murdered him when I was 16. We couldn't find him at first. And sorry, I gotta take this out before I forget. It's in. We couldn't find him first. We had to issue lost person alert, because the days were passing and nobody knew where he was. And my mother, divorced from him at the time, but still very much in love with him, was going through all the morgues and hospitals and to try to find and locate him, because we didn't know if he left to somewhere or something happened to him, or if he was dead, although we never thought that was true, that was reality, right? You never kind of think of the worst thing possible. So we had a week and a half of this, a week and a half of not knowing where he is. And I was at school. I remember bright day as now. I was at school when my mom came to school and took me out of the class to tell me that they found my father, that he was dead. I think my world crumbled, and I don't really know if I think I would be so much different person if that wouldn't have happened. See, I'm talking and I'm getting emotional. Yeah, it's if you have lost a father at a young age, you might feel what I'm talking about now. It's surreal. It's surreal. Your mind just shuts off. And I think a 16-year-old doesn't really know how to cope with it. I had by then my grandfather had passed away and my grandparents from my mom's side have passed away already. So I have been in touch with death and in a family, and it wasn't something completely new, but I think when my grandfather passed, he was older, although nobody expected that either. It did affect me, obviously, and I think in a way it affected me that I always was thinking, well, something bad is going to happen. And I remember even talking in one of those, sitting outside on the stairwell with my dad, talking about that with him and saying that I feel so, that life is so unpredictable, and that I fear that something bad might happen after my grandfather passed away, that something bad might happen again. And I remember Dad said, well, you can't live thinking about that something is going to happen bad. You never know. It might. He wasn't going to lie to me, but you got to enjoy your days now. So yeah, after that happened, I think a lot of in my head changed. A lot of my emotional attitudes, my expressions, the way I was a lot different from what I am now, and maybe what I would have been in another way. I think it still affects me. I couldn't, and honestly, it took me years to mourn him, to get through the grief, to be able to talk about it. Even years afterwards, when I moved over here in Canada, I remember days when I would cry for hours because of being separated, obviously, from my home country, but at the same time, thinking about my parents and thinking about my father, who by then have been passed away like for 12 years by then. It always was emotional. I couldn't talk about it. I was crying a lot about it, even like 10 and some years more about afterwards. So I always say that, what, if somebody passes in your life, take your time. If it starts influence your life too much, affect you in a bad way, then go get help and try to talk with somebody, a friend, a family member, or a therapist, if you can't find anybody who is close to you, because it does affect your life a lot. And yes, everybody takes their own time. And it's okay to take your time to mourn, but maybe sometimes you just need a little bit of help to talk. I passed away 5 years ago. It's going to be 5 years in 5th of July coming up. And I really still have a hard time talking about that. I talk a little bit, but I can't really talk about the day she passed away. Too much sends me crying. And yeah. So hug your dad if you can today. Call him if you can't. And even if you think, if you have some misunderstandings or arguments, if you have something unsolved, if you haven't talked with him for a couple of years because of the issues that you have, no matter what, they're really your dad. say that when you things differently, even if you didn't know that. I did, but go for it. But you're always going to remember that that's part of you, really by blood or adopted. Uh, somebody who is part of you, either, you know, blood, skin wise, that was your heart wise. So just give a call. And that you have now. So I will let you go now and go back to making of my dinner. I made an apple cake while I was talking with you guys, and I hope I didn't burn it. All emotional. I can show you my apple cake. I gotta go and proceed further on with my ribs, made by Kirby's Fish and Grill recipe from their channel. I'll put the link below afterwards. Happy Father's Day if you are a father. We're going to celebrate in our family today as well with Andrew and all three of our kids. And if you're our father, then happy Father's Day to you. If you're not a father, go out and celebrate anyway. It's celebration of life at the end of the day. That's what it is, no matter if it's Father's or Mother's Day or Family Day, it's celebration of life. And if you have your father still alive, go give him a call or give him a big hug, even if he might say, "Oh, what are you doing?" And deep in the heart, I still appreciate that. Thank you all who are there. And sorry again, I didn't pay attention too much in the chat. Well, I did see you popping out, but as I said, this is my first time doing this, and I'm on my phone in the kitchen, not really understanding what I'm doing with a live stream on YouTube. So sorry if I didn't address you. I will go back and see all your amazing messages that I see right now. Thank you so, so much for all the nice words and kind wishes. As I said, this video was more for you guys who don't have fathers to don't feel alone today, to feel that somebody else goes through the same emotions that you do. And for those of you who do, just to have a little reminder. So be nice to each other. Keep creating. Love you guys. And we'll see you on Monday on our regular Live with Pusa at 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern. Love you all.